Hello, and welcome to another Space Foundation Space Commerce Entrepreneurial Interview. I'm Shelli Brunswick, the Chief Operating Officer. Today, I have the privilege of talking with Dr. Leon Alkalai. Leon is a retired JPL Fellow of the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, California Institute of Technology, where he spent 32 years after getting his PhD at UCLA in 1989. During his career at JPL, Dr. Alkalai held numerous leadership positions and was responsible for the capture leadership of both the Grail mission to the moon in 2007 and the InSight lander on Mars in 2012. In early 2021, Dr. Alkalai retired from JPL and created Mandala Space Ventures, a space-focused Pasadena-based venture studio for new startups in the emerging space economy. Leon is also the general partner at the Explorer One Venture Fund, which is also affiliated with Mandela Space Ventures. Wow, this is going to be an amazing episode. Thank you, Leon, for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Shelli.
Well, there was a lot in that intro for our audience. I mean, you were at JP. Well, first of all, you were at UCLA. That's a great school. You were at JPL. You decided to start up a company. You decided to start a venture fund. Can you share with our audience a little bit about your journey and background and how did you get to where you are today?
Oh, my. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me and giving this opportunity to share a little bit about my background. So, my background is something that actually people don't know very well, but I've actually grew up internationally. I was born in a country that doesn't exist today called Yugoslavia. I was born in Belgrade, today Serbia. And when I was 1 year old, my family moved to New York City. And so I grew up in New York, specifically in Queens, and then lived there for the first 7 years of my life. And then the family actually moved back to Belgrade, where I lived for about 5 years. And then we moved to London, to England, for 5 years where I finished primary school and started high school. The family went back to Yugoslavia, where I finished high school and engineering school at the University of Belgrade. And then I went to UCLA for my master's and PhD programs in computer science. And in 1989, I was very fortunate that a fellow from JPL came recruiting at UCLA. And at the time, NASA had a program to look at high performance computing for deep space exploration. And I was a science fiction geek. I loved Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. And I remember growing up and reading about Odyssey 2001. And I had imagined that I would be working on the HAL computer in Odyssey 2001. And I just love the idea of contributing to deep space exploration using high performance computing. But life took me in a different direction at JPL, very exciting beginning, but I ended up doing many, many more things in addition to starting in the area of high performance computing, which maybe was ahead of its time. And maybe today high performance computing in space is becoming more of a reality.
Fantastic. Well, that's an amazing journey. And it kind of shares with our audience that sometimes you have to be open to changes in the marketplace, or maybe you thought you were going one direction, but you have to pivot and find another path. So I appreciate you sharing that story with our audience, because we do have listeners from around the world, and many of them are young career professionals or college students who are looking at finding their way in the space industry. So thank you.
Definitely. I think space in many, many dimensions is a global and unifying theme. Doesn't matter where you were born, what school you went to, and where you came from. It's where you're going. And, there's a lot of international and cross-cultural kind of value in diversity across the globe. You get to learn about different people, different cultures, different ways of thinking. So for me, at least, growing up internationally really defined me, and to be kind of a perfect for space. So that's my background.
I completely agree. And the Space Foundation has just announced our latest global space economy number for 2021. And when it was $469 billion. Of that, 77% is commercial, which leads me into my next question. Tell us about Mandala Space Ventures and Explorer One Venture Fund. It seems like a really exciting time to be in space investment and startup business sector, as we can see that global space economy growing from $469 billion in 2021 to potentially 1.4 trillion by 2030 and over 3 trillion by 2040. So share with us, how did you transition from JPL and create a company and a venture fund?
Yes, so I was extremely comfortable in my career and my position at JPL. I worked with some wonderful people. I had the ability to leverage a lot of opportunities, meeting people around the world. But after 32 years of service to NASA and the nation, I just felt that it was time for me to do something new. Maybe one would think that I would come to that conclusion earlier, but things were just really good at JPL. And I just wanted to move out of my comfort zone and do something new. I've always been somewhat of an entrepreneur at heart, so that was something that came pretty natural to me. But the main thesis for leaving JPL and creating Mandala Space Ventures is a vision and a belief. The vision was that in this area of the ecosystem between Caltech, JPL, Pasadena, La Cañada, that there was so much fertile ground, kind of almost in a metaphysical way, composted over 80 years of there being a JPL and even longer a Caltech, that the environment was rich for planting seeds of new startup companies focused on space. And that has not been the traditional, let's say, focus or track record of this region, of this area. Caltech is more known for spinning out companies in the bio and chemistry, life sciences than it is in space. And yet you have this large institution called JPL that is world known, but it's really not world known for spinning out companies. So the vision was there's a lot of potential here through licensing IP from Caltech, partnering with faculty, partnering with JPL in the future, working with other organizations, and just being a friendly place for entrepreneurs to come to and start up a company focused on space. So that was the vision and the belief that this is really a perfect location to set up camp for what is called a venture studio, where we invest in founders at a very early stage when the ideas are just being generated. That's where Mandala Space Ventures is focused. Early stage startup companies focused on space.
Fantastic. And as I had mentioned, the Space Foundation just came out with our latest space report numbers, and we're seeing that 90% of the space economy is really commercial. You know, it's products and services we're using every day. And when we analyze the data, we're actually using more space technology and space activities are happening on Earth than in outer space. What are some of the biggest areas you see for investing in the space sector today?
Yeah, so there are a number of areas that are emerging as well-defined sectors in the space economy. Certainly, the transportation business is still emerging. It's not only SpaceX or Blue Origin and ULA. There are many startup companies emerging in the launch vehicle business, including ABL, Relativity Space, Virgin Orbit, Rocket Labs, Astra, Fireflies, many others. And that's just bringing down the cost of access to space. So that's clearly one area that there's still room for growth and investment. And when I say transportation, that also means taking the satellite system to its destination. So launching satellites is one thing, but then maneuvering these satellites into their right constellations is another aspect of transportation. That's only one sector. I believe there are a number of other sectors that are emerging. One that I'm particularly excited about and where Mandala has launched its own company is in the area of digital space, software platforms, enterprise software specifically for space applications. We launched a company called Continuum Space, but there are others out there in the commercial world. I also believe another area emerging is one of infrastructure in space. So optical communications, high bandwidth networking in space is another area. There's also a whole area of in-space services, refueling, depots, and providing fuel in space in this constellations in lower Earth orbit. And there are other areas that are also emerging, especially, I believe, in the emerging lunar economy. There will be landers, rovers going to the moon and providing resource mining and infrastructure development on the moon. And I think the list goes on and on.
Absolutely, I agree with you. At Space Foundation, we believe there are 14 different sectors that relate to the space industry, and you touched on a number of them. Yes, space is one of those sectors, but you touched on the other, transportation. We also look at agriculture, the Internet of Things, public safety, healthcare, education, finance, and more. So I love that. Now, but I do want to go back. You talked about you've launched a company called Continuum Space. Can you tell us a little about this company? And where did you come up with the concept? And why is this one of your first companies to launch?
Yeah, thank you. So Continuum Space came as a first output out of Mandala. And I wanted the first company to be very, let's say, a quick entry into the market. I did not want this company to be another launch vehicle that takes many, many tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to raise before you can get revenue. So I wanted to have some early successes, a quick entry into the space marketplace. And the way that was done is by licensing from Caltech, from JPL, proven flight tools, existing flight tools that are already being used by NASA, by JPL for our planetary missions. License those tools into a software as a service platform called Continuum. And Continuum is building an end-to-end enterprise platform for space, starting with mission design, navigation, orbit determination, up to next being build and test of your flight and mission system, then operations, and then data analysis. Those were four major areas of focus for Continuum. And to do a SaaS model, which is very, very standard for earthly applications, providing a SaaS platform, meaning everything's hosted in the cloud, that is new for space. That is not the standard for space. And so we had to negotiate with Caltech to allow us to license tools into Continuum with the notion or with a plan for those being available to other clients through the SaaS model. So that was the reason for launching Continuum, to get something quickly into the marketplace. We already have the prototypes being used by several customers, and low capital expenditures so that we don't need to ask for a lot of money in order to launch the company.
Absolutely. I love that. I always talk to people when they think about creating a business plan or launching a new product. How can you get that quick win? What's the low-hanging fruit? And I also like how
Absolutely.
you shared your partners. You talked about Caltech and licensing. And we know that NASA also has a tech transfer office, as do many other government agencies, such as AFRL, the Air Force Research Lab, the Department of Energy, JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, and the European Space Agency also have tech transfer. So for our audiences that are listening and you're an entrepreneur and maybe you don't have that idea, or you have the idea, maybe you should see what's already out there and you could apply for that patent. And just like Dr. Leon said, you could look to commercialize it. Now, Leon,
Totally.
you talked.
I believe
Yeah,
that. Sorry, Shelly.
no,
I
no,
believe
go
that.
ahead.
I believe that's a huge factor in any startup company. I'm a strong believer that startup companies really do not have R&D funding. They don't have the budget to do the kind of R&D research and development that the national laboratories or the US government can do. At NASA, at JPL, we would spend tens of millions of dollars on developing a detector for detecting, planets around other stars and so on, or galaxies. And a startup company could never do that. They could never raise money and then put money into research and development. So the real opportunity is for startup companies to license and partner with NASA is through the Space Act Agreement, but through other CRADAs with the Air Force Research Labs, and leverage the US government investments. Large amounts of money go into technology development every day. And the challenge here for startup companies is to either partner or license with the universities or government institutions and commercialize those technologies for the betterment of all.
Fantastic. I love that. And you talked about partnerships. You talked about Caltech. Who were some of the other partners along the way that helped you launch both Continuum, but also Mandala? And what are some of those partners that our entrepreneurs listening today could look to for help?
Yeah, so we, as of today, we don't have any formal signed partnerships, but clearly we have an excellent working relationship with the Aerospace Corporation, with AFRL, with the Space Force. We're in the process of hopefully signing a CRADA with the Air Force Research Labs. We're still working on that. But those are the kind of institutions that I'm looking to, including DOE labs, Department of Energy laboratories, other NASA centers, certainly JPL over the long term. But those are the organizations that I'm looking at as of today in the government arena. But we have a wonderful working relationship with UCLA. UCLA just launched a new space institute, so we've reached out to UCLA. Also with USC. USC has one of the largest and most, I would say, outstanding master's program in aerospace. And the faculty there are amazing. So we have a working relationship with USC, UCLA, and certainly with Caltech as well.
Amazing. And that shares with our audience that when you're an entrepreneur, you're not going it alone. There are organizations out there that can support you and help you throughout your journey, both through the federal government, but also within states, there's also a lot of opportunity. And when you look to license one of those patents with NASA or other government agencies, there can be funding that goes with that in the form of grants. So please, I ask our audience, check those out because NASA really wants to commercialize that technology.
Absolutely.
Now, Leon, I'm going to ask you a question because it sounds like you've lived a charmed life and everything's been wonderful. What is one of your biggest challenges you've had in your career or in your journey?
Well, in my career and my journey, I faced a number of challenges. Going from where I finished college at University of Belgrade in Yugoslavia, it was not a natural. It wasn't given that I would be here today in terms of my career growth. UCLA to me was a fabulous school, a fabulous place to meet people, and I actually credit. I'm certainly now a naturalized U.S. citizen for a long time, but I credit the United States and certainly the environment at UCLA for being very open to people coming from long way away from different parts of the world where they have an accent. They come with different backgrounds, different histories behind them. And I found both UCLA, JPL, NASA to be just an open society for those who want to do, those who want to achieve, regardless of their background and last name or accent or whatever. So I just found that transition from East Europe to the United States as being a challenge of trying to just get noticed and get recognized for your merits. And so that was the biggest transition that I made, leaving my home and my family in Belgrade and just going into the unknown in Los Angeles at UCLA, and then making it from there to JPL.
Amazing. I love that. And I really like that you shared because we do have a very large international audience. We partner with a lot of organizations and we do have people tell us that they want to come into the US space system, but it can be a challenge if you're not a US citizen and finding that pathway into the US first with a green card and then eventually citizenship. So I appreciate you sharing your journey and that it may have been a challenge, but it was obtainable and doable, and others can follow your method and follow your lead.
I think so, and I think especially more so. I think the space is becoming more and more global. You see entrepreneurship happening in Singapore, in India, in many different parts of the world, in the Middle East, and the UAE just announced major entrepreneurial efforts. Saudi Arabia, Israel, South America, and so on. So there's just a lot of opportunities there. Space is global. It's by definition international, and so I think that's both for me. That's inspirational, every astronaut that I talk to or listen to who went into space described the experience as transformational in a way that is basically unifying amongst people rather than building barriers. So to me, that's a beautiful, beautiful part of space.
Absolutely. I've heard some astronauts say that they've gone to space to discover the Earth.
Yes.
Well, with that, we'll take a short break for some great insight on what's happening at Space Foundation.
The Space Foundation Discovery Center, where engaging interactive exhibits tell the story of space and its importance to everyday life, all in a safe, clean, and fun environment. Make new discoveries together at the Space Foundation Discovery Center, Colorado Springs.
Welcome back to our entrepreneurial interview with Dr. Leon Alkalai, the CEO and founder at Mandala Space Ventures. Leon, we talked in the last episode about one of your biggest challenges, and that was making your way into the U.S. global space economy. What are some of your biggest successes you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I'm very proud of, frankly, my whole career at JPL has really been a real pleasure, a real, at times, big challenges, at times, ups and downs in terms of finding my career throughout JPL. But the two, I would say, big events that I'm very proud of and which were recognized by NASA is I was responsible for leading proposal teams, what we call capture lead, for the Grail mission, the Grail mission to the moon in 2007, and the InSight lander competition that the team won in 2012. And both of those were extraordinary efforts in terms of building teams, working with the scientists, the PIs, working within the JPL system. And NASA ultimately selected only one out of about 25 or 28 proposals. So both of those wins, the Grail, they were both part of the Discovery, NASA Discovery in solar system science that I was responsible for capture or for winning those proposals. And the Grail mission launched in 2011 and was superbly successful in recovering a very detailed gravity map of the moon. And Professor Maria Zuber was the PI and on that mission. And then on InSight, the PI was a good friend of mine, Bruce Bannert, from JPL. And the InSight lander successfully landed on Mars, commissioned its payload, and even recently has done some phenomenal science on measuring the seismic activity on Mars as of recently. So those were two of my, I would say, biggest accomplishments that were also recognized by NASA. For both of those wins, NASA awarded me Distinguished Individual Achievement Medals, which I'm very proud of.
Congratulations. And I agree with you. There are occasions where I've won a few awards, and I always say, these awards are not for me. These awards are for the amazing team I work with at Space Foundation or when I was in the Air Force. And so it's that amazing team that we get to serve with that makes it all special. So congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. What would you like to share with some of our audience members that would like to hear about some lessons learned you have?
Very good. I've approached this business of entrepreneurship from space science and engineering. Different world, totally different world. And the different world from investing and venture capital and so on. So what I'm trying to do is to bring a little bit of engineering experience, a legacy of 30 plus years in space, into how we make decisions of where and how much to invest into the space startup companies, and bringing that to the level of understanding the technology and the risks involved in maturing that technology. I feel that's one contribution that Mandala Space Ventures can make, because going into space and then performing in space is very hard. It's hard because the environment is new, it's different for commercial companies. And there is a tendency in startup companies to kind of rush through that process. It's fair to say that NASA missions, JPL, and other NASA centers, the NASA missions are expensive. They're expensive for a number of reasons. One is because as custodians of taxpayers' funds, there's an extra layer of due diligence and risk reduction that NASA performs. In the commercial startup companies, it's venture, it's high risk, high payoff, but still there's a need, in my opinion, for a risk reduction, technical due diligence, and understanding the risk, even at the earliest level. So to me, the main advice is for entrepreneurs, don't ignore the legacy and lessons learned of NASA and other NASA centers like JPL, Goddard, and many others, where a lot of lessons learned were earned in the hardest of ways of failing. And there's no reason for the commercial world to ignore those lessons learned, whether it's environmental testing on the ground or planning the execution in space. A lot of these things can be prevented. A lot of these failures can be prevented. It may take more time. It may take more money up front, but I think that's something that's very much worth doing.
Fantastic. So, as we think about financial feasibility, what makes Mandela Space Ventures financially feasible, and are you currently in funding for it?
Yeah, right now, so there, if you remember, you mentioned that there are two companies that I'm part of. One is Mandala Space Ventures, and the other one is I'm a general partner in the Explorer One Venture Fund. The Explorer One Venture Fund was created in parallel to Mandala as being strictly a financial company, a financial VC venture fund on a small scale. And right now, it's a $20 million venture fund. And the idea was to have two of those in tandem, the Mandala Space Ventures focusing on entrepreneurs in residence, early stage companies, and then Explore One going into the next level of investment after seed. And the main thing here is that Mandala currently has a small fund of a few $1 million to invest up to $250K in pre-seed or seed round companies. So that's kind of the comfort level for Mandala Space Ventures. In addition to that, the Venture Studio offers services to the startup company. Those services are mentoring, consulting, advising in terms of business development, pitch deck development, market assessment. All that is part of the Mandala Space Ventures Venture Studio model. The Explorer One checks could go up to $1 million in the first investment, and they're typically at a Series A and above. So the two companies are working hand in hand together. And Mandala Space Ventures at this point is not fundraising, and that may happen in the next year or so.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, one of my favorite areas to talk about is about the importance of advocacy and awareness. The Space Foundation is the advocate for the global space industry, as well as through our workforce development roadmap. The first step is to build awareness that there are opportunities in the space industry. So, I wanted to get your thoughts about the importance of advocacy and awareness in this industry.
Well, it's critical, and I'm kind of learning about it as well, having a social media presence, having an outreach branch. And so I also think so far, I have to say that I've been extremely welcomed to this community. I've had even this morning a call with a number of other venture funds that are investing in space or venture studios. And it's been very collegial, very friendly, kind of a welcoming spirit into this ecosystem. So, you know, I'm in the business not only of launching startup companies, but doing good for others. And if I can be of help without any economics to Mandala, I'm more than happy to do that. I also think it's important with my legacy and experience to basically share my knowledge with the world. I've published a few articles and posted them. So anybody who's interested should look at our website at mandalasspaceventures.com. And I will continue to do that, basically share my views on the emerging space economy, on recent events, and so on.
Well, wonderful. Well, maybe you'll partner with us at Space Foundation. We have our Space Commerce Institute, and we're
Okay.
always looking for partners. And I am a Forbes Technology Council columnist, so I'd love to partner with you on an article. So we have something we can work on together to continue to build that awareness and
Love it.
advocacy.
Love it. Will do.
Absolutely. So, what's one piece of advice you think would benefit entrepreneurs that are listening today?
Well, I would give an advice that, you know, in my opinion, there's these two different worlds that I think are kind of coming together in a way. One is that the whole field of venture capital and high risk, high payoff ventures like what Y Combinator does and many other accelerators is just a wonderful business to be part of. It's just exhilarating, it's motivating, especially for the younger generations. It's really exciting. Add to that the component of space. And I think the component of space requires, in my opinion, an additional layer of due diligence when it comes to understanding the nature of space, the nature of vacuum, temperature, radiation, gravity. All those factors are new compared to, let's say, earthly conditions. And it requires of the entrepreneurs to either have a co-founder, a partner who understands space very well, or somehow build it into their team. That it's not straightforward to take a great idea from Earth and just cast it into space. It is a challenge. At least 50% of startup companies that launch new systems into space fail, and they fail for a number of different reasons, sometimes for reasons that can be easily avoided and tested on ground before they're launched. There is a tendency to kind of use launching into space as a means of fundraising. Let's put another CubeSat into space, demonstrate something, and then you'll raise another, 10, 20 million and so on. I think there's an element of that strategy that really needs to be thought out clearly, because the chances of actually launching into space and failing are quite high.
Excellent advice. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And is there anything you'd like to share with our audience we might have not covered?
Well, just again, I hope to leave with the audience a very strong encouragement that space is, as a field, as a destination, as an opportunity, has both a spiritual, inspiring component to it. It is an equalizer amongst people and nations, and it's a way of building a coherent society across international borders that is, I think, hopefully the future for humanity.
Well, thank you, Leon. We look forward to having you back and finding out where the industry is going and how you're helping to create the future.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Shelli.
You're welcome. For our audience at home, if you're interested in learning more about our Space Commerce program or watching other entrepreneurial webinars, go to spacefoundation.org and check out our Space Commerce series. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again. There's a place for everyone in the new global space ecosystem. Thank you.